The owner of this car had tried installing a new fuel relay to cut his gas mileage in half, but had just made a mess in the fuse box and now has double the gas mileage instead. And this one came in with a coolant system that had been entirely replumbed in white PVC piping. The owner of this Honda came in for an oil change when the mechanic noticed the condition of the tires. When told about it, the customer insisted on only getting the oil change. This car came in after the owner complained about a noise when braking. And this tie rod was being held in place with enough rope and tie wraps to secure a small boat. This car was in for an oil change, but it turned out that it had more than just one owner. And this customer came in saying, "Hit a squirrel on my way to work and now my wheel makes a weird sound." This mechanic was just doing an oil change on this customer's car, and this is what was in the oil pan. I wouldn't call this an oil change, but rather more of an archaeological dig. This customer had built his very own water compressor. This customer had lent their car to their grandson, but got it back with quite the clunking noises when turning and pulling into the driveway. This customer rolled in saying their buddy had repaired their broken steering a few weeks ago, but it still didn't work as it should. The mechanic found this beautiful silicone, tie wraps, and electrical tape creation underneath the car. This customer came in right on time to get some new summer tires, as these old ones would have most likely caused hydroplaning. This customer had let their son borrow their car to go on a weekend trip with his friends, but came in because now the car wouldn't start for some unknown reason. And this head had a bit of a leaking problem. The mechanic working on this car had it in for a tire inspection and found a large section of the contact surface had been patched with gray silicone. And this car came in with its engine, transmission, and drivetrain all messed up after the customer had just done an oil change on it, but not filled it with the right amount of engine oil and then immediately after towed it behind their RV, but left it in second gear. And this trailer came in after the owner said that he's not quite sure whether the brakes are firm or not anymore. This customer came in and wanted to trade in his Volkswagen for a new one. But once the mechanic lifted the hood, he found the radiator, engine fan, and pretty much everything behind the grille looking like a total mess. But the outside of the car looked pretty untouched. Once the dealership told the customer that his car was worth pennies on the dollar, he got upset, told them to shove it, and drove away. The owner of this car rolled in for an oil change when the mechanics noticed that the car had sport seats installed, which were not properly secured. Customerstates, hit a small hole in the road and now I have a growling noise when driving. This customer had been complaining about their car overheating for a few months, but kept getting told the coolant was fine. When the mechanic finally pulled the radiator, he found the fins in a condition that made it look more like a musical instrument than a car part. Comment "Yeehaw" if you can spot the brake pads in this clip. Uh-oh. And this car came in with what looked like a fairly straightforward oil filter swap until the mechanic cranked it and fluid started pouring out from both sides of the filter. This car rolled in for a new thermostat when the mechanics noticed one of the wheels looking a bit too pumped up for the job. Customer came in complaining about their forklift feeling unstable when lifting things off the shelves. This customer rolled in complaining about a pretty wobbly steering wheel. Customer came in saying that their window regulator stopped working and there's a rattling sound from the door. The owner of this car declined all repairs, saying that he thinks the mechanic is over-exaggerating how bad his brakes really are. This truck apparently had its own little private club inside the glove box. The mechanic who got underneath this one found that the transfer case had cracked clean through and pulled itself off its own mounts, with the drive shaft just floating around with nowhere to go. And this car didn't come in a moment too soon for a new timing and serpentine belt. Customer states, strange scratching noise from underneath the car while driving. Please advise. The owner of this car had been hearing a pretty weird sound for a couple of weeks and finally came in to have it checked out. Turns out, whoever had done the oil change had decided to secure the skid plate in a pretty creative way. And this customer came in saying that he thinks a ghost lives inside his engine because it sounds like someone's rattling chains all the time. Turns out that he actually, technically, wasn't all that wrong. This customer rolled in saying, "Car's been running rough lately, but I do all my own oil changes and I do them on time, so I'm not sure what it could be."
Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
The owner of this Lexus had come in absolutely certain the car had a wireless charger in the center console. He'd been placing his phone on the armrest for 3 years waiting for it to charge. The owner of this Citroen C4 came into the shop saying that he has major brake issues ever since his friend, who's a hobby mechanic, had tried replacing the brake bomb and some other parts related to the car's ABS system. The technician found the brake bomb to be loose and installed without an O-ring, which had caused a brake fluid leak. Yep, looks perfectly fine. The mechanic sat down in this Jeep Cherokee expecting a standard electrical diagnosis. He found wiring on the floor, wiring under the dash, wiring across the glove box, and an engine bay that looked like the previous owner had been mid-project for about 4 years. The owner of this vehicle said that their 7-year-old son had been fiddling with a bunch of buttons in the car and were worried that the interior lights were now broken. And this customer said that oil changes are a myth invented by oil companies, but he still had to come in because his truck had started running sluggish and the check engine light was on. The mechanic popped the hood on this one and found the brake fluid reservoir looking like it had been topped up by someone who grabs whichever bottle is closest. And this customer came in saying that his battery drains itself and that he has lots of strange electrical issues ever since he installed a new amplifier, so he uninstalled it, but the battery still doesn't hold a charge and this is how he had left the wires. And this car came in with a bit of an oil leak. The mechanic working on this car found the engine wiring looking like something had been living in there for a while. Turns out the car had picked up a new tenant at some point and he'd been pretty busy with the wiring harness. And the owner of this SUV came in saying that it starts okay but dies after a few miles of driving, and that she began having lots of issues with the car since her ex-husband moved out. The mechanics found one of the fuel lines like this. Nice. Customer states, she's been in the family since new, kept her garaged her whole life, just needs a couple things sorted and she's good for another 100,000. This customer's GMC Terrain had been pulled behind a tow truck because of a parking violation, but the tow truck driver had left it in gear, which led to one of the rear tires bursting, the rim getting split in half, and the transmission getting totally wrecked. The mechanic working on this car probably needed a minute to take it all in after he opened the hood. Epoxy on the fuel lines, exposed copper wire everywhere, a pressure gauge strapped in with metal clamps and electrical tape, and a mesh net draped over the engine for reasons that remain unknown. The customer later said that their friend had helped them out, and by the looks of it, the friend had been very busy. Customer came in saying that he thinks his brake rotors are fine and only wants a light touch-up of the rotors and some new brake pads installed. Customer states, every time I turn on the turn signals, my dash does this. The owner of this car came in saying his neighbor had recently helped with some suspension work, but now the ride felt a little rough. The front strut towers had split at the corners and the customer's neighbor had gone at the cracks with some JB weld. And this guy wanted the look of cross-drilled high-friction brake rotors, but without the hefty price tag. The owner of this car hit a piece of wood on the highway and just about made it into the shop before the wheel fell off. Customer states, I've been getting some complaints about the smell, but I think it's starting to grow on people. This customer came in and said, I think my car is octane intolerant because it's been sounding like this for a while now. This customer had been on her way to pick up a friend from the train station when the brake pedal went strange on her. The rotor had worn down far enough that one of the pads had slipped out entirely and was grinding into the inside of the rim, and the whole wheel was covered in brake fluid. This car rolled in because the rear 12-volt outlet needed to be repaired, but this is how the rear seat looked like. Customer states starting issues. The owner of this BMW came in complaining about it feeling really sluggish. Turns out the turbo had one foot in this life and another foot in the afterlife. And this customer had poured a cocktail of oil additives into their engine to improve fuel consumption and get rid of a knocking sound, but now says that it runs worse than ever and wanted the mechanics to have a look. The owner of this car had been on his way to a job interview when the temperature light came on. He had the cooling system topped up the week before by his roommate, but it looks like he must have forgotten something. Customer states, vehicle has trouble starting. Tried replacing battery with another used battery but still has starting issues. And this customer came in saying that they had fixed their brakes at another shop 2 weeks ago, but that the brakes hadn't felt firm ever since. This customer came in after they had gotten stuck in mud, floored it until they got onto pavement, and then they had gotten a really bad burnt smell and the car wouldn't go into gear anymore. The owner of this car came in saying it had started to feel like it was floating over every bump, and when the mechanic had a look, the upper strut mount was just not feeling very well. When your car is your office, mailbox, living room, garage and bedroom all in one. And this customer came in saying that their steering wheel has started to wobble a lot more than normal and wanted it looked at. Customer states, heard a noise from the engine and then it went away. I kept driving for a bit to see if it would sort itself out, but about 10 minutes later the car shut off on me. The mechanic who pulled this wheel found the rotor, hub, and inside of the rim completely soaked in something that very much did not belong anywhere near a brake system. Turns out someone had gone a little overboard trying to silence an annoying sound. And this customer had just purchased this AMG Mercedes from the dealership and was on his way home when he tried to drift through a roundabout but ended up losing control of the car and slammed into a light post instead. Looks great. This truck had been on its way back from a camping trip when the owner noticed a new vibration at highway speeds. The differential cover came off and the main gear inside moved around freely in every direction it wasn't supposed to. And this guy had his own version of an underglow kit. Customer states, had car in for some work at a different shop, but brake pedal now goes to the floor. Can you check it out? This Mercedes G-Class was brought in by the owner as it had started to knock and rattle a lot at all speeds, and it turns out that they had a massive oil leak after the owner had hit some orange safety railing. Customer states, every time I go faster than 40 miles an hour, I get these really bad clunks. And this mechanic couldn't figure out where a brake noise was coming from. He checked the front, the rear, and even under the car, but then he opened the trunk. And this flywheel has definitely seen some better days. When the mechanic lifted this truck and got underneath it, he noticed the suspension parts were wearing quite the rust jacket. Some of them had been doing so for long enough that the rust had become real bad. How to know that you need new engine mounts. This car came in with some pretty interesting lug nuts. The owner of this car said that she went back to the dealership where she bought her car to have them replace the wipers because she just couldn't figure it out herself. But the dealership somehow still managed to get it wrong. This customer came in complaining about a small but strange noise at higher speeds and wanted it looked at. This customer came in saying, my son borrowed the car for a few days, but now it sounds like one of them old boat engines. The mechanic working on this truck didn't even need to look under the hood. The fuel gauge was having such a good time that it had started smacking the temperature gauge like it was a little brother. And this customer rolled in because he had just replaced some belts and done some repairs on the engine fan by himself, and now had a strange noise coming from the engine. The mechanic who worked on this customer's truck was told it ran fine, but just a little loud. What he found was a crack in the engine block the size of a small country, and when he fired it up to show the customer, they got their own fire show. This car rolled in with no oil and some massive engine and undercarriage damage after the customer had hit a sloped Jersey barrier on the highway while they were looking down on their phone. And this car came in for some new blinker fluid. Customer states, "I think I have a homeless person living underneath my car because they keep knocking whenever the car is moving, but not otherwise." Customer states, "Did the rear brakes myself last weekend and used whatever I had in the garage. I've done it before, so should be totally fine." The owner of this truck was out hunting in a nearby forest and got stuck on a trail and tried flooring it to get loose. But it didn't go so well. This car came in because the owner said that every time they turn the AC on, the car sounds like it's full of pebbles. This Chevy truck came in because one of the power mirrors had stopped working, after the customer had done some beautiful work on it, all by himself. The owner of this Chevrolet Equinox had been on her way to visit her sister when she noticed something dripping in the driveway. Someone had been at the engine with orange silicone at some point, but it was still leaking through it. Customer came in saying that he has a strange rattling sound coming from the engine after a local gas station mechanic performed yearly maintenance on the car. The owner of this car came in saying the handling felt a little loose after their son had borrowed it for a few days. Turns out the lower ball joint wanted to go on a lifelong vacation to the scrapyard. Customer states, "Car idles and accelerates poorly and my gas mileage is horrible. Please advise." And this car came in after the customer had been towing a trailer and said the clutch had started slipping badly on the highway. What came off the car was not really a clutch anymore. The owner of this Mercedes-Benz said that ever since he got a new engine installed by one of his friends, there's a loud sound whenever he floors it. The owner of this car had driven through a river at high tide and successfully hydrolocked his engine. Customer states, "Growling noise when driving at all speeds. Please advise." Customer states, "My Honda has been smoking a little from the engine bay, but I think it's just a valve cover gasket." And this car rolled in on a tow truck as it wouldn't start because it had a massive oil leak after the owner had hit a larger bollard as he had wanted to brake but had accidentally floored the gas pedal instead. This Chevy Equinox rolled in like this because the oil light and engine light was on after the customer hit a piece of a broken concrete statue that had fallen out of a trailer on the highway. The owner of this car came in complaining about her steering feeling kinda strange after she had picked up a fluffy pink steering wheel cover to fix it, but it didn't do much. The owner of this Hyundai Tucson came in for some exhaust repairs when the mechanic noticed that it has some major problems with the subframe. This engine had made a fairly final decision at some point. The bottom of the block had completely let go, the connecting rods were spinning freely, and the oil pan on the floor underneath was collecting the evidence. And this customer rolled in with some suspension issues after the customer had recently installed new struts at his buddy's garage. I think they must have missed something. Yummy. And this customer apparently really wanted their Nissan Altima to have a sportier feel. The owner of this Mazda CX-5 came in saying their engine had developed a little tick and wanted it looked at. The mechanic pulled the oil filter and cut it open and found it full of the fun kind of glitter that an engine makes right before it stops working. This truck was in for some new tires, but it looks like it'll need some new brakes as well. And this customer came in saying, I think I might have actually gone too fast. This Kia EV6 rolled in after the owner said she hit a speed bump on her way out of the parking garage, and now the front end was making a sound she'd never heard before. The mechanic opened the hood and found the strut mount looking like this. Customer came in saying that his car accelerates sluggishly after he had installed a new sport air intake that he found on Temu. This car rolled in after the customer said that it had started to handle poorly ever since they hit a pothole. The owner of this car came in saying they had a dunking sound when going over bumps and that they had no idea what could be causing it. The mechanic got underneath, grabbed a hammer and chisel and started chipping away at what turned out to be a truckload of dried concrete packed into the undercarriage. The owner of this car rolled in saying that he has had to replace 2 batteries in the course of 2 months after his cousin had helped him install a used sound system in his car, and this is what the mechanics found. And when your car starts sounding like this, it's probably best to get a new one. This car came in because it needed a new battery after the customer had installed a mobile radio system all by himself. And this customer came in saying that their truck had started handling like a nun carrying a fridge full of watermelons down a couple stairs. Customer states, starting issues. The owner of this truck came in saying that he's been off-roading with his son for the weekend and heard a loud noise on the way back. The transfer case had blown itself open and was letting it all hang out. This guy came into the shop saying that he wanted an oil change on his truck as he was preparing to sell it soon. The mechanics asked him how much he wanted for it and he said around 19 to 22,000. Customer states, but a little engine noise is normal, right? And this wheel bearing had started to work extra as a wheel of fortune. And this car rolled in with a handful of different problems as the customer's usual mechanic had gone bananas during the yearly maintenance and mixed up pretty much everything you shouldn't mix up when working on a car. This customer came in because their car had started to run really badly after they had their friend help them install a used cylinder head, and this is what the mechanics found. Customer came in saying that she backed into a garbage can at a local Walmart. Once the mechanic had the car on the lift, he found the front suspension looking like this. Bent control arms, twisted sway bar, tie rod ends completely knocked out of shape, and parts of the wheel being pretty bent. Customer states, car has started to remind him of the Vietnam War. Customer states, wheels need to be balanced. Please check and advise. Customer states, there's a tiny vibration at highway speeds, but I think it just needs new tires. This customer came in for a new radiator expansion tank after he failed to fix his old one with quite the amount of silicone. And this customer came in saying, car has started sounding like a frisky cat in the spring, please advise. Turns out that the issue was caused by a transmission that had seen better days. Customer states, truck keeps making a strange noise, but only when the missus rides along. This customer had stripped the entire interior of his car himself to chase a rattle he's been hearing on his way to work every morning. But he couldn't find it, so he came into the shop asking the mechanics for help, and it turned out to be a small metal bracket on the dashboard, barely the size of a thumb. The owner of this car rolled in because they had a fuel leak after another shop had repaired and shortened the exhaust for them, which placed the tailpipe right next to the plastic fuel tank. The owner of this truck came in complaining about a clunking sound when driving at highway speeds. The owner of this 2014 Dodge Dart came in saying, I think my car has started to remember its past life in the Wild West. The owner of this truck had been running a few errands when he noticed the temperature gauge climbing a little higher than normal. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, the ground underneath the truck had turned itself into a small lake. This car came in with quite the fuel leak and an extra drive shaft that someone had misplaced. And this car rolled in because of a clunking noise coming from the back. The owner of this car had apparently decided to do his own transmission service at home to impress his father-in-law with his mechanical skills. When the mechanic had a look at the pan, the magnets were absolutely covered in metal particles. And this customer was in for some new brake pads when the mechanic discovered that the brake calipers were held on by a piece of rope. This car came in for some new shocks. The owner of this car came in saying he just drove the car through an automatic car wash, but that he felt the steering wheel wiggle a bit too much, so he came in to have the steering checked. And some jobs are just that much easier when you don't live in the Rust Belt. And this truck rolled in because it had started to run pretty roughly after the customer had done some timing work on it themselves. Customer came in saying that his car has started to develop a real personality and kinda wiggles when he drives. This gas station mechanic told his intern to go wash a customer's car before they would come pick it up, but the intern wasn't able to get the car out of drive, so he smashed into the brushes. Thankfully, the station's insurance covered all the damages. Sparky Sparky. Choo choo! All aboard! Customer states, steering has felt a bit stiff lately. Might be the servo pump or something. But it's definitely not the tie rod. My buddy just did that one, so that's solid. Has to be something else. And this car was in for a tire rotation when the mechanic noticed that it had a long-haired PPF. Customer states, hit a larger hole in the road and then I couldn't steer anymore. Cozy. The mechanic working on this first generation Mustang had been inspecting the suspension, and when he touched the upper ball joint, the whole wheel assembly decided it was time for retirement. Customer states, seat feels uncomfortable during longer drives. Please advise. The owner of this Chevy Malibu came in saying the car had started feeling sluggish after he had done some work on the engine. The mechanic popped the hood and found the MF sensor sitting in there, but just facing the wrong way, which explained the problem. Customer states, has to constantly pump up his front tire and thinks there's a piece of glass stuck in the tire. And the owner of this car came in complaining about their steering feeling too relaxed. Customer states, I've been hearing a little knocking sound from the front for a few weeks now, but only when I go over bumps. Is that normal? When your car looks like this and the mechanic is telling you to fix it as soon as you can, but you decide not to, it's fair to say that you're a bit cuckoo. This customer came in saying, the AC doesn't really work, and whenever I turn it on, it sounds like a jackhammer. Customer states, son changed his own oil for the first time. He wasn't sure how much to put in, so he just kept going until it felt right. And this customer rolled in with some engine issues. Take a wild guess what it might be. Customer came in saying that the car smokes a little on cold starts, but once it warms up, it's totally fine. Probably just needs some new oil, right? This car rolled in with a total transmission after the owner had accidentally forced it into reverse while trying to shift into 6th gear while driving on the highway. And this Jeep Compass came in with some transmission issues after the owner said it had recently gotten a new battery installed at a different shop. And when you live in the Rust Belt, don't expect your truck to last too long. The owner of this car came in because they had a screech and grinding sound at lower speeds after they had some brake work done at a different garage. Turns out that they had only installed the calipers with a single bolt and the wheel nuts were finger tight. The owner of this car came in saying, "Yeah, there's a little steam coming from under the hood, but I think it's just condensation." This car rolled in because of an exhaust leak after the customer had built his own DIY exhaust using some square tubing. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, and until next time.